Hello and welcome, wherever you are right now, whether you're sitting at your desk, lying in your bed, or walking somewhere quiet. I am glad you found your way here. Take a moment, slow down, let the world outside get a little quieter, because today I want to take you somewhere, not a place you can visit on a map, a place that only exists in the space between words and imagination. I want to tell you about a boy who watched, a boy who remembered, a boy who one day picked up a pen and changed the world. His name was Charles Dickens, and this is his story. Part 1, A Boy Full of Questions. The year 1812 was a cold and ordinary year for most of England. But on the 7th of February, in a small house in the city of Portsmouth, something extraordinary happened. A boy was born. His name was Charles John Huffam Dickens. His father, John, was a man who loved life, perhaps a little too much. He spent freely. He laughed loudly. He told wonderful stories. And he never quite worried enough about tomorrow. His mother, Elizabeth, was warm and clever. She taught young Charles to read before he was old enough to attend school. That was her greatest gift to him. Because once Charles could read, the world cracked open. He would sit for hours with a book in his hands. Adventure stories, fairy tales, tales of faraway seas and impossible heroes. For a small boy in a small house, books were a kind of magic. They made the walls disappear. The family moved often, as families with money troubles often do. Portsmouth, London, Chatham. It was in Chatham that Charles was perhaps happiest. The countryside was soft and green. The air smelled of grass and river water. He would roam through fields for hours, turning over stones, watching birds, making up stories inside his head. And there was a house, a beautiful house on a hill, with tall windows and proud chimneys. It seemed to belong to another world, a world of comfort and security. One day, Charles stood below it, staring up. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Work hard enough," his father said, "and perhaps one day a house like that could be yours." Charles never forgot those words. Neither should you. We will return to that house before this story ends. Part 2, The Factory. But childhood, even a happy one, does not last forever. By the time Charles was 12, the family's money had run out completely. His father had borrowed too much, promised too much, and spent too much. And in 1824, the debt collectors came knocking. In those days in England, a man who could not pay his debts was sent to prison. Not a prison for criminals, but a debtor's prison. A place for people who owed money they could not return. John Dickens was taken to a place called the Marshalsea Prison in London. His wife and younger children moved in with him, because that is how it worked. Families stayed together, even behind prison walls. But Charles was not allowed in. He was 12 years old and perfectly capable of working. So they found him a job. In a small, damp building near the River Thames, there was a factory. It made boot polish. A dark paste used to shine leather shoes. The factory was called Warren's Blacking Warehouse. Charles was given a pot of polish and a stack of small jars. His job was to cover each jar with a paper lid, tie it with string, and attach a label. Over and over, all day long, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. He sat near a window. Rats moved through the shadows beneath him. The other boys who worked there were rough and loud. Charles did not belong among them, and he knew it. He had been a boy who read books and dreamed of adventure. Now he was a factory worker with ink-stained hands and nowhere to go after dark. He was deeply ashamed, and he was desperately lonely. But here's the thing about Charles Dickens. Even in the worst moments of his life, he never stopped watching. He watched the other boys, their tired eyes, their worn-out shoes, the way they ate their small meals quickly, as if someone might take the food away. After work, he walked through the streets of London. And London was a city that had no interest in hiding its cruelty. Rich and poor lived steps apart. Grand carriages rolled past children sleeping in doorways. Warm light spilled from bakery windows, while hungry people pressed their faces against the glass. He walked past crowded workhouses, grim gray buildings where the very poorest people were sent to live and labor for barely enough food to survive. He walked through thick river fog, past lamplighters and street sellers and beggars and pickpockets. He saw it all, and he held it all inside him. Part 3. The Wound That Became a Gift. The factory chapter of Charles Dickens' life lasted only a few months. His father received a small amount of money from a distant relative who had died. He paid his debts. He walked out of the Marshalsea. The family was free. Charles was pulled out of the factory and sent back to school. He was relieved. He was grateful. And he was deeply, permanently changed. Here's something remarkable. For most of his life, Charles Dickens never told anyone about the factory. Not his friends, not his publisher, not even his own children. He carried that shame in silence. Only after his death, in private papers discovered among his things, did people learn what he had experienced. The factory left a mark on him that never fully healed. But wounds, as any writer will tell you, have a strange power. They make you see things other people miss. They make you feel things other people have forgotten how to feel. And they make you care, truly care, about people the rest of the world has decided not to care about. Part 4. Words on the page. Charles finished his schooling and took a job as a clerk in a law office. He was bored within weeks, so he taught himself shorthand, a system of symbols and marks that allowed a person to write as fast as someone could speak. He practiced until he was one of the fastest in London. Then he became a journalist. He reported on debates in Parliament. He covered elections. He traveled across England, writing about the people and places he encountered. And all the while, he was writing other things too. Quiet things, private things. In 1833, he slipped a short story into a letterbox outside a magazine office on a dark evening. He did not sign his name. He did not know if anyone would read it. A few weeks later, he opened the magazine, and there were his words printed on the page. Real and permanent, and belonging to the world. He later wrote that he walked for a long time that night, tears running down his face. Not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. This is what I am, he must have felt. This is what I was made to do. More stories followed. Then came his first novel, The Pickwick Papers, published in 1836 when Dickens was just 24 years old. It was released one chapter at a time, once a month, like a serial on television today. Readers across England waited eagerly for each new installment. By the time it was finished, Dickens was famous. Part 5. Stories that changed the world. Over the next 3 decades, Charles Dickens wrote with a kind of controlled fury. He wrote Oliver Twist, the story of an orphan boy surviving on the brutal streets of London who dares to ask for something more. a story about innocence in a heartless system. He wrote A Christmas Carol, a tale of a cold-hearted miser named Scrooge, who was shown the cost of a life lived without compassion. Dickens wrote it in 6 weeks. It transformed the way an entire nation celebrated Christmas. The warmth, the giving, the thought for those who have less. Much of that tradition traces its roots to this one small book. He wrote David Copperfield, which he once described as the book closest to his own heart. A boy who suffers, survives, and eventually flourishes. Many readers have quietly suspected it was the story Dickens was always trying to tell about himself. He wrote Great Expectations, about a poor boy who dreams of becoming a gentleman and what he discovers when that dream finally comes true. He wrote A Tale of Two Cities, set during the violence and chaos of the French Revolution. Its opening lines remain among the most quoted in all of literature. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. 15 novels in total. Hundreds of characters, all of them in their own way asking the same question. What do we owe each other? Dickens wrote about ordinary people, poor people, forgotten people, people whose names never appeared in newspapers and whose faces never appeared in paintings. He gave them a voice. And when readers heard that voice, something shifted. Social reformers pointed to his books when arguing for new laws. Politicians could not ignore stories that made their constituents weep. Factories were investigated. Schools were reformed. The treatment of children in workhouses began to change. Literature, in the hands of Charles Dickens, became something more than entertainment. It became evidence. Part 6. The Performer. Writing was not enough for Dickens. He wanted to feel the audience. He wanted to hear them laugh and watch them cry. So he took his stories on stage. He performed public readings across England and in America. He did not simply read from the page. He inhabited every character. He changed his voice for each one. He bent his body. He used his face like a sculptor uses clay. Audiences were spellbound. People who came to laugh found themselves weeping. People who came to cry found themselves laughing. Sometimes both happened at once. He was a one-man theater. Thousands came to see him. In New York, crowds gathered at the harbor before his ship had even docked. But the performances cost him something. He drove himself without mercy, wrote constantly, edited magazines, organized charity performances, campaigned for social causes, traveled without rest. His body, bit by bit, began to give way. Part 7. The House on the Hill. Do you remember the house? The beautiful house on the hill that a small boy once stared at in wonder. In 1856, Charles Dickens purchased Gad's Hill Place, the very house his father had pointed to all those years ago. He lived there for the rest of his life. The boy who had sat in a dark factory, labeling bottles and feeling forgotten, had come home. Part 8. The Last Page. In the early summer of 1870, Charles Dickens was working on a new novel. It was called The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and he was deep in his pages. On the evening of June 8th, he sat down to dinner. And then, without warning, he collapsed. He had suffered a stroke, a sudden event inside the brain that can happen without any sign of warning. He was carried to a sofa. He never regained consciousness. The following day, June 9th, 1870, Charles Dickens died. He was 58 years old. The news reached England like a wave. Shops closed. Newspapers cleared their front pages. In the streets of London, people stood quietly. the way people stand when something has been lost that cannot be replaced. He had asked for a simple, private funeral, but he was buried in Poets' Corner at Westminster Abbey, among the kings, the poets, and the heroes of English history. For days after his burial, ordinary people came to lay flowers at his grave. Factory workers, street sellers, servants, children. The kind of people he had written about. The kind of people who had always known he was writing for them. My friend, we have reached the end of the story. But before you go, let me leave you with something to carry. Charles Dickens began his life with almost nothing. No money, no connections, no safety net. He spent some of his most important childhood months in a coal factory, feeling invisible. But he did not let that darkness close him off. He let it open him up. He used everything. Every difficult memory. Every face he had ever watched. Every voice he had ever heard. And he turned it into something that has lasted more than 150 years. You are here today, listening, learning, building something too. Maybe some days English feels slow. Maybe some words still escape you. Maybe sometimes you wonder how far you still have to go. But you are moving forward. Every word you understand is a door that was not open before. Every story you follow to the end is proof that you are growing. Keep going. Your story is still being written. Thank you for being here. Until next time.